So technical difficulties aside, and my typical rambling aside, I'm really excited that all of you are here, and I'm super excited to introduce our first speaker, Brian Leroux. For those of you who don't know Brian, he's an amazingly accomplished engineer, but he's a better person. He's one of my favorite people. He's a fine Canadian. And and he's here to talk to us about Deno, which is really just node spelled differently. So I'm really excited to learn more about Deno. I hope you're excited to learn more about Deno. So I'm now going to give the signal for it to switch over to Brian.
Am I on? I think I'm on. Does this look good? This looks good. Okay. Hi, Cascadia. Great to be here with you virtually. What a strange time. Excited to talk about Deno with everyone. It is an anagram for node. Sometimes people call it Deno. I don't think there is consensus yet on what we call this thing, but it's a new JavaScript runtime, and if you use Node.js, it might be interesting to you. Initially, it was going to be like an intro to Deno, but it's not that interesting to talk about what's Deno. Let's talk about what's different about Deno. And these slides are online. You can find them at slides.begin.com. And when you see blue stuff, it's usually a link. So let's just get straight into it. I'm Brian. I'm a web devy dude and been doing this stuff for way too long. And now I'm going to tell you about Deno. So Deno is a new JavaScript runtime. And by JavaScript runtime, I mean it runs JavaScript, the language, as we know it, but it's meant to run it headlessly. So it's not running it in a browser. It's running it typically in a server or on a computer of some kind, in your local machine. Maybe possibly in the future it'll be embedded. And it's created by the original Node.js core team, which makes it somewhat dramatically interesting because it's a clean slate. They got to start over. They got a do-over. And sometimes this is vilified as the idea of second system syndrome. I don't think that's the case. I think the case here is that Node.js got real popular, as you all probably well know. And as Node became more popular to use, it became more stable. And they can't just ship a breaking change into Node. So Ryan Dahl and Bert Belder, the sort of some of the original Node core folks, went off and forked V8 again into a new runtime. And instead of binding it with C++, they bound it with Rust. And they were able to make some changes as JavaScript evolved. And I want to call out that sometimes people will conflate something new with better, or that Node had made some mistakes. And that's not the case at all. Node didn't make any mistakes. Node pioneered quite a bit of this stuff. And Node's sort of a victim of its own success. It can't just make big changes. And so a fresh slate is a big deal. So the four things that are different about Deno from Node.js is that it's secure by default. And so you get to opt into security exceptions. It's got a comprehensive API surface, which I'm excited to dig into with you. It's very different from Node in this regard. Node is kind of a minimal API surface where you get to use the ecosystem to augment your runtime capabilities, which is a double-edged sword. It's web standard aware. And so it's using modern JavaScript without any transpile steps. And so you get all the latest and greatest specs. And it also adopted some web de facto standards around JSX and TypeScript, which is a controversial choice. And this is important to you because JS evolves faster than Node.js. So JavaScript is a well-adopted language and very popular for a lot of good reasons. And as JavaScript has evolved, Node has become more and more stable. And so Node's kind of been left behind. And there's tons of tools in your toolbox already to deal with this, like Babel and Webpack and the such. But more tools are always useful, and possibly not transpiling is also good. So it's a short talk, so I'm going to be cruising through this content quite fast. First big thing here is that Deno is secure by default. So this is a nice way of saying that all the code is sandboxed. By default, there's no permissions to access the network. There's no permissions to access the environment variables, the disk, or process. And so rather than tell, I'm going to show you what I mean. Whoa, hey, everybody. So I'm in a folder right now. on my desktop, and I'm going to touch a file, index.js, and I'm going to quickly edit that. And console.log, JS, cool. I'm going to pop a terminal. I'm going to run that. Oh, that was Node. Hey, what is going on there? One sec. Close up. Deno run index.js. Cool. So there you go. That's just Deno running JavaScript, standard JavaScript. But let's use a method. Let's get the current working directory. We'll run this. Aha, permission denied. So I can't read my current directory unless I give Deno explicit permission to do this, which is kind of awesome. I think it's like allow fs or something. Whoops, allow fs. Allow env. Well, I'll never remember, but there's one big catch-all. Okay, there we go. We got our directory. So that gives you a sense of the permissioning stuff, which is pretty exciting. I'm just going to shift this around so you don't have to see our weird green room. All right, so it's secure by default. Access to your file system and environment and the such is opt-in. And as I showed, you've got this sort of blanket, opt-in where you can run the world. Now, this is important to you because security is everyone's job as a software developer, and opt-in means that we have to deal with the consequences of security upfront rather than treating it as something we deal with after the fact. Larger companies running large JavaScript workloads actually have a lot of issues with isolation and security. So there's plenty of benefit to this approach. Okay, number two thing about Deno that's different from Node.js is that it's comprehensive. So everything is built in. And Node, early on, the sort of philosophy was small modules, minimal runtime footprint that could be iterated on in isolation, and user land would solve all the big problems that were out there. And I think 10 years in, we're now seeing the consequences of that trade-off choice. With a large ecosystem comes a lot of decision making and a lot of paralysis related to decision making. Having a build time author experience is really nice because you don't have to make these decisions up front. They're kind of made for you, and you don't have to decide between a million modules or deal with the dependency updates of a million different modules. They're kind of all there. I bifurcated this into two sections, author time and runtime. This is a hangover from when I worked at Adobe. They would always think about things during author time versus runtime, and it's an important way if you're a tool builder to think about what the developer experience is going to be like. So in Deno, author time experience is extremely comprehensive. Formatting, linting, building, and testing are all first-class citizens of the runtime. The other comprehensive aspect of this is the runtime experience. So there's a runtime library and a standard library, and both of them are rather vast. So Deno's got a linter, but this bike shed is still being painted. And so if you want to try their linter, you have to run it with an unstable flag currently. And I really like that they've done this. So they're flagging things up front like, hey, we don't know. We're still debating whether or not semicolons are cool or whatever. And so Deno lint is in its early moments. Deno format is a joy. And so I sort of throw in a joke link here that this is the antidote to Parkinson's law of triviality. The law of triviality is that people will tend to debate the most trivial aspects of a program before dealing with the harder aspects. If we look at this earlier code example that I made here, you can see a kind of sloppily writing some stuff. I could maybe create a function that does something horrible like this, and we can run Deno format index.js. Oh, you won't see it until I reopen this file. You can see it's now nicely formatted, and it looks like semicolons are still winning the day with the Deno team. And that's fine, because you know what? Who cares? It doesn't matter what it is, and if there's a default, just use that. Deno Test is also super nice. This is another built-in. I wrote a little blog post about it. I guess I'm sort of plugging myself here, but if you want to check out Deno testing more in depth, there's a link in the talk where you can go do that. I'll do a quick test just so you can see what it feels like. I'm just going to call it test.js because I like writing tests. And you're going to be shocked to find out that there's a global. This is my test, whatever. And doesn't fail. Probably. I'm experienced enough in this craft to know that this still might fail. So what Deno Test will do is look for files with the name test in the current working directory, and it'll run those files and output some nice test output for you. This is huge. So testing is not something that's nice to have. You kind of need to write tests if you're going to be building a production system. And having this baked in is just a really big deal. It's going to save your team a ton of time out the gate. There's no debating about which assertion library or any of this stuff. And this is important to you because you are immediately productive. There's no excuses. You walk in the door, you've got your prettier, you've got your linting, you've got your test running, you've got your assertion all figured out for you. Now that's just the runner side of things. There's also a comprehensive runtime. And so there's two supported API services. There is the built-in API. I don't know why these links aren't blue, but they are links. And there is the standard library. The cute dinosaurs too, which really makes me want to say Deno more than Denno. Deno's built-in runtime library is actually inspired by Go. So if you're a Go programmer, you're going to feel very comfortable here with what they've chosen to do. It's also inspired by some other runtimes that you may be familiar with if you're a web developer. But this is all baked in, and this is comprehensive. So like basically anything you could do with Node's FS and Path modules is just kind of sitting there. Also file watching, which is quite nice. And then their standard library is basically a greatest hits album of NPM. If you were to look at the top 100 modules that are sitting in NPM, most of them are probably represented here. Denno bundles these, and so you still have to install these modules to work with them, but they're versioned along with the Denno runtime, so you're guaranteed compatibility, which is a huge failing of the current Node ecosystem. Something else just to sort of note or eyeball that's in here, there's all kinds of goodies that are emerging, but you'll notice there's one in particular that's really interesting, and that's Node. They are building a Node compatibility layer for Denno, and they are well on their way to a lot of those APIs. And so if you want to run Node code, there's a good possibility that you can even do that with Denno, which is pretty exciting. The reason this is important to you is because you can build confidence that there's not going to be any unplanned work due to breaking changes. When you rely on lots of ecosystem projects, those ecosystem projects themselves are changing all the time. And when lots of changes are happening, that creates unplanned work. What we want to do as software developers is focus on our core business value. We don't want to be chasing dependencies around. And so this is a nice evolution of things. Okay, number 3. One of the huge differences between Node and Denno is that the web specification standards are largely being adopted within Denno. And now Node is working on this too. This isn't a dig on Node. It's just Node has a lot of legacy to build against, whereas Denno got a clean slate. So out of the gate, you are authoring ES modules. And yes, modules are downloaded and cached the first run. This is exactly the same as how NPM works, by the way. People sometimes are like, oh no, these modules are being downloaded. You download modules for NPM too. You're manually doing it. That's the only difference. There's another big one, fetch is built in. So there's no client server shims. And something else that's pretty exciting is the WASM work. And I've got a link there, which you can check out to read more about that. Now, downloading your dependencies every time is still not super fun. And so if you don't want to download your dependencies every time, you can run Deno bundle. So another one of the built-ins is a bundler. No web packs needed, no third-party bundlers. Deno just comes with one. So you can run Deno bundle against any module on the internet or locally. It'll bundle that and then pump it out to your standard output. This is hugely powerful. So if I wanted to take Shep Biko's DynamoDB module and create my own DynamoDB module, all I got to do is that. And now I've got my own DynamoDB module to build on top over to cache with. Something else worth noting around the built-in bundler is that this happens dynamically under the hood as you're working. You don't have to think about the cache, but sometimes if you want to reload that cache, Deno gives you the ability to do that too. So if I were to bundle, I could bundle that, run that same bundle call a million times, and it's just going to run off the cache. But if I wanted to reload the cache, my local cache of Deno bundle, oh, maybe I didn't select that. I can do that too. And we can see it goes through the dependency graph. It grabs all these modules, it caches them on my local machine. And so, we're not reading and writing them twice. Very useful. Denno also supports lock files if that's something you think is a good idea. There's still stuff missing. There's actually still a lot of stuff missing. For me personally, I'm waiting for Web Crypto and File Reader to land. I would really love to see the DOM get implemented inside of Denno, in particular HTML element. This would enable us to do server-side rendering of web components without resorting to ugly hacks. And I expect all this to land with time. I think it's very likely. And this is all important to you because the web is the most important distribution channel in human history. We want to focus on our core business value. We don't want to be fixing compiler chains for Node, trying to turn it into a web browser. It'd be far better if we had a headless web browser that we were programming against that was server context aware. And that's exactly what Deno is. Sorry, I'm talking really fast because I'm trying to get through these slides. So, de facto standards. De facto standards are kind of funny. These are things that are not ratified by a third-party consortium that you have to pay to play. This is stuff the community has decided as a whole is important. And in particular, that those things are TypeScript and by virtue of TypeScript JSX through TSX. These things are built in, so you can write TypeScript or JSX, and Deno is just going to work. This is important because using TypeScript tends to require some maintenance, and this is now handled by the runtime, so you can focus on your code instead of trying to deal with the tooling around generating the right code every time. Deno will just handle this transparently for you. All of this, to me, points to a big code savings. It's just a reduction of config. This is less dependencies, which is less third-party liability, which ultimately will result in more developer cadence and speed. And that is just over 15 minutes for my talk. If you want to check out Deno and deploy it, work at begin.com, and we support that. And we have an open source project analog called Architect. And I think at this point, we are probably ready to go to some questions. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Hey.
You're on.
I'm on. You're on. We're here.
Yeah.
Virtually. We did it. Amazing. I'm so proud of all of us. Great job. Thank you. And anybody, virtual round of applause, snaps. I'm going to give you a clap. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at you. Yeah. All right. We're going to do this.
I know it's weird. This whole video virtual thing.
It is. It's just taking some adjustment. So, hey, all right. So we've got a couple Q&A things we'll roll into, but great talk. I feel like I got 4 main things. So I just want to make sure that I got them. Takeaways from talk, 3 rather. Semicolons are still cool. Tests are really awesome. And we should all be using Vim when we're live coding on conference talks, right? That was the talk.
No, I have really, I have really low standards for text editors. It's just muscle memory at this point. If I try and use anything else, I'm fumbling around. I heartily recommend checking out Vim. I'm a Vim nerd for sure, but it's
we'll have another.
It's not playing on easy mode. Yeah.
Okay.
Semicolons though, definitely use those instead of spaces.
Yeah, tabs.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, but in real, we do have a couple great questions from the audience. So we'll dive in there. So one of them was asking about the permissions and the check-in exception. Does that occur initially when run or only when the certain line is reached?
I think when run, and I think it's and I don't know, but I think the imports is how it walks and knows what's being accessed and used. Okay. That's a great question though, and worth following up on. I've felt it be quite fast, so my assumption is it's static.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to go through and then I'll have a few as well. So one of the other ones is asking about using Prettier.
Yeah, I mean, you could, and there's nothing stopping you, but format's baked in, and it's kind of like Go, just use that. Who cares?
Semicolons.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun. I don't write any of that style, and then I run Deno format, and I'm like, whoa, weird. But whatever.
Awesome. Okay, and so This person even used your name in the question, so I'm going to put it in there. Brian, is there any idea of the cool hardware APJS? Oh, sorry, I thought it APJS, and I was like, what's an APJS? This is what happens when you read small text in the screen. Anyway, any idea of the cool hardware APIs, serial USB or Bluetooth, that Apple doesn't want in the browsers that will make it into Deno?
That was from Lewis, Phone Gapper. I love it.
How'd you know?
I don't know. I think they're really, it's a new project. Committership is very small, so they're biting off as much as they can right now. And I know that crypto is a big concern and that's the focus at the moment. But Rise super interested in embedded tech, and the WASM path seems to be where that's going to be going. So if WASM can do it, then Deno probably can too, and that will be the happy path to get there. Yeah, it's really early. So like they don't even have baked in crypto APIs yet. This is early moments, but I imagine with time, all of anything that's in the Rust ecosystem is fair game.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, we've got a few others. So this talk was great because we went through here's all the amazing things about, I'm going to call it Deno.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody knows, by the way. This is I hear committers using both. So
okay, perfect.
Yeah, we can do that.
We'll use Deno for this first one. So you talked a lot about what's great about Deno. Yeah. However, can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on with the community? Or tell me what's the 411? What's the deets on what else is going on in the Deno world?
The community is young and new, and most young new communities go through growing pains, and I think Deno is no exception. I think they're still coming to terms with how they want to run themselves as an open source project, and they were handed a pretty easy softball with having a code of conduct, and they fumbled it completely, if I'm being direct, which is fine. And I think for posterity, hopefully the committers see this, because it's a very easy, simple thing to do, to be inclusive and to make a community safe, much like what Cascadia tends to do. And I feel that that's an area for improvement. So good for them. They've got opportunities to improve. This would be one of those things. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. Being inclusive is not dramatic. It's the right thing to do. So that's one thing I'd say that they will end up addressing with time. They just don't know that yet.
Yeah, agreed. And it's one of those things that's just so important. I feel like I have the rallying cry a lot in community, just not only within what I'm doing here with Cascadia or in general, but my job in developer advocacy. It's just always trying to make sure you're really thinking about the community first, right? Because it's so important. Bringing people together are on one united front and a passion, and you have to treat them right and make sure it's a safe space. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting. So let's see. Any other questions? No. So I'll bring another one of the questions that I have while we're waiting from the audience. From that one, can you talk a little bit about Deno dropping TypeScript?
Ooh, yeah. So this is a mildly controversial topic. Deno internally was using TypeScript for a time, and they're abdicating that in their own build processes. And the committership is very adamant that they're going to continue to support TypeScript for all time for user land, but internally they don't want to be using it. And there's a pinned issue in their GitHub where you can read about the justifications for this. I think it's interesting. They're not finding that it scales very well for them, and their use case is different. They're a runtime. They're not an application layer app, and those are different use cases and have different trade-offs. But a lot of the things that people would laud TypeScript for didn't work out for Deno, and I think it's okay to say that. You're not bad if you use TypeScript. It's not bad if it didn't work for a particular use case. It's just it's not good for everything. My bicycle is terrible for riding across the ocean to go to Europe, and I'm not upset at my bicycle for that fact. And so I think it's been a bit overblown. People are like, oh, TypeScript must be bad if Deno's not using it. And that's not the case at all. Userland is gaining a lot of value out of TypeScript, but a large project is also finding that it's challenged by it, and I think that's also worth noticing. And so. yeah, check that issue out and read it and decide for yourselves. And just pay attention to that type of thing. It doesn't have to all be perfect for all use cases.
I think that's a great point for us to all really remember, especially when we're evaluating software and these different options, is that not everything's going to be the one size fits all, right? It's not going to be the perfect solution, and even if it's the newest one, doesn't mean it's necessarily the right one for you, at this time. And one thing isn't necessarily bad because TypeScript isn't like the worst thing.
No,
it has its values and it has its there's a tool for everything, right?
We're using it in production, which is questionable for sure for a very recently 1.0 product, but we mix and match. So I get value out of TypeScript and use it on select aspects of the application layer and around API contract validation. It's great. Yeah. And there are other parts where I don't use it, and I don't feel bad about that. It's just an extension. It's not ruining anyone's life. It's totally fine to write JavaScript. It's totally fine to write TypeScript. It's even cooler to write both and have them interop transparently without having to run a compiler.
Nice. It's even cooler. I like it. This is just all the cool things. That's what we're learning today.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to do one more check here. I know we've got a little bit of a lag from everybody. If there's any other questions, you have like another minute to bring it on. Otherwise, I'm going to sing a song with Brian, and then we'll move on to the next one. We were talking in the green room when you almost you exposed us for a minute, and I was talking about, and I was just wondering, well, we could have been doing karaoke back there. Don't worry, friends, karaoke's coming. Heidi asked me to pick the song. I've been into Disney songs recently, but I don't know if I'm ready to share that with everybody. Been trying my best at Moana.
I'll just stay muted for everyone's benefit.
We could do Uptown Funk to keep it on theme. Make sure that Hugh Duke doesn't kick us off. All right. Well,
I like that I've got everyone muted, but they're all like hand signaling.
I know. I think they're telling me to stop. So, okay. All right, Brian. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. It was amazing. We are going to let you depart from the stage now. So everybody find Ryan on Slack.